When you were talking about correction earlier on, I don't think you explained how the process would work. I think I came up with the analogy of opening a pair of parentheses and then the class conversation moves on. When I've seen you teaching, one of the things which is most interesting to observe is that within these parentheses, a new problem comes up which is dealt with because it's very clearly the problem of the moment for the class. It's the right things for the class to work in. And this process can go on in a number of stages. I mean, there can be parentheses within parentheses within parentheses, and then you sort of go up again. It's almost like you surfacing up, go up to the surface, and go back right up to the final point. Yes.
In that case, what I would do would be to go back to the class conversation, back to 2 or 3 moments of the class conversation, 2 or 3 sentences of the class conversation, pick it up, take it from this person to this person to this person to the person who made the sentence in the first place that we've just been working on. This can go on for an astounding amount of time. It can go on for 20 minutes sometimes. Yes. And they pick up the conversation as if nothing had happened. It's really quite extraordinary. Another good thing to do is, see, the thing about it is too, that this is fun because the students they've geared themselves up to say their sentence. Right, and then their sentence is done, and then they, whew, my moment is over. Yes. And if I say to them, all right, you start again. And what they have to do is dredge this up. They have to get it back up again. Now, very often it doesn't come up. What we don't realize is that when things go in, when they have a sentence which actually goes in, that this is not speaking a language. Speaking a language is getting it back out again. And these ways, these these routes, if you like, as in a route or a way or a lane or something or other, that kind of a route, they have to be built. Right? They have to be built.
Pathways, let's call them
pathways, that's the word I'm looking for. These pathways have to be built, and they don't just happen. And so it might be necessary to go to the person before that and get them to ask the question which produced the energy of the result and the result. Right, and then the person can
well, I mean, and we're coming back to expression and communication again. Absolutely. This is a process of expression, and yes. It's not a process of playing games with language at some intellectual level. It's having something to say and then actually saying it, expressing it.
Exactly.
And in fact, when we were talking about that, was something else I wanted to raise on that, because one of the most difficult things for in any language, but certainly in English as well, is to master modal verbs.
Yes.
How do you work on modal verbs, and how does this relate to the expression versus communication issue?
It's much more difficult to work on modals. I very often point out to them that modals could have been moodles, right? That when people, that modals are about the mood of the person who is speaking.
So the word modal
could have been moodle,
right? The mood of the person speaking.
Exactly, right. Yes. If I say, for example, he might come. What I'm translating is the mood, if you like, or the energy that I'm in, the internal climate, yes, the inner climate that I'm in. And you can't just create climates like this, just like that. It's just not.
You can't fake it. They're genuine feelings that people have,
they're
yes.
Emotions, absolutely. Yeah. And so we talk about that to a certain extent, but what I do is, from the very beginning of the class, whenever if somebody says, for example, can I open the window, then that is when to work on a modal,
yes.
Right? That's to say, when the person is with what they want to express, yes. That's the time to work.
Well, when they genuinely have the mood in them,
yes.
that requires a certain modal, that is an opportunity which you cannot miss as a teacher, because they're rare enough. You want to absolutely exploit those. Absolutely, you want to wring as much as possible out of those.
Yes, exactly. Now, there are other things that you can do. It's possible, for example, to create moods a little bit with things like if I won the lottery. But it is a little bit artificial.
It is,
yes. One thing I do with that, for example, if supposing we're working on if I had won the lottery, I would have done that. I would have bought a new house. Yes. I always get them to finish the sentence because it's a 4-part sentence, right? Which is, if I had won the lottery, I would have bought a house, but I didn't win the lottery, so I didn't buy a house.
Okay, and then it becomes something at least which is, it's a little bit artificial. This is practice outside of the real game, but at least it's true at that point.
That is really, really important, in fact, because that's what allows them to understand what we're talking about, right? If I had won the lottery, I would have bought a house. What are we actually talking about? We're talking about but, right? But I didn't win the lottery, and there's a change of tense, so I didn't buy a house. Right? Or so I can't buy a house, yes. Right? And so I find that an extremely useful thing to do, to add the other 2 sentences.
And perhaps it's worth saying, I mean, one is, as a teacher, because modality is such a difficult area for students, and because the words don't typically translate from one language to another, the way we split up our inner emotions, how we describe our inner emotions, will vary from language to language. So it's not an easy thing for students to pick up.
Right.
Any opportunity, if one sees a student is irritated with another student, that's a great moment to make sure that when they respond to the other student, that irritation is expressed, shows in the words that they choose.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm not at all against having emotions in the classroom. No. Another thing I'm not against, which I'd like to say, is if I see somebody who clearly has had his dose, right? Yes. I simply say to him, go to sleep. Yeah. And I do that quite often. I say to somebody, just go to sleep. And that's what they do. They sit there and they just go to sleep in the class. And when they wake up, they usually sleep for just a few minutes. And when they wake up, they're refreshed. And it's much better to have somebody to sleep for 5 minutes. All they're missing is the conversation, the class conversation, and whatever gets corrected. But I mean, out of so many hours, they've got enough. And you can't absorb once you're full, right? Once your mind is
pointless to stay awake, isn't it?
Absolutely, what you need to do.
Served, yeah.
Yes, and this is what sleep is for. Sleep is for clearing things out. Sleep is for giving you a new start, if you like. And so I simply say to them, now go to sleep. In actual fact, if somebody has been working very hard on something, and I'm aware of the fact that they now they have it, I also say to them, now go to sleep. Sure. Because what they need to do is actually establish it. They need to get it in, right?
They become integrated with the rest of
integrated, absolutely. They need to get it integrated. Mm-hmm. Yes. And so I do that quite often, in fact. When somebody's had a real struggle, now go to sleep. Yes.